Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Lorraine Driscoll, founder of Building Better Brains. So, I talked earlier about the concerns that certain critics, if you will, have about dyslexia and other reading disorders, but specifically the studies that I talked about earlier this week was the drawbacks of diagnosing reading disorders based on senses. And today I just wanted to pop on and talk about the other issue that's come under fire. And to be honest, I totally understand this perspective and I really appreciate the people who are bringing forth their concerns with our obsession with scores. We have an obsession with scores, numbers, grades, even. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have maybe any grades, particularly as kids get older, but particularly when it comes to diagnosing and why that could be actually problematic and hold some kids back. And let's face it, when your kid is struggling, whether it's in school or whether it has to do with diagnoses and reading scores or whatever the case may be, um, these kids really start tying their self-worth right to their scores, and it really can have a profound effect on their self-esteem. And if they're going to shut down, or if when it's going well, it's great, this is what keeps some of these kids motivated. But when it's not going well, which is usually the case with kids with reading difficulties, then it can really cause some serious areas of breakdown. So the other issue too is that when we base it on score, so dyslexia, for example, there's like a cutoff for the criteria. And so if there is a child who isn't does not have a severe case of a reading disorder, so I don't want to just say dyslexia, just reading disorders in general, then they might not get the help that they need because they don't, it'll come back and you'll get a psycho ed evaluation and they'll say, you know what, it appears that he's just a weak reader, or she just needs to practice more, or maybe getting a tutor would help, but it's not dyslexia. And as a parent, I mean, that's what you want to hear, that your child doesn't have dyslexia or doesn't have visual processing disorder. But by the same token, the result is that these kids end up not getting the help that they need. And ultimately, the other drawback, right, is when we start getting these scores and focusing on scores, and whether it's a diagnosis that your child gets or an actual score, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that is the case with a lot of, I don't want to say the case, the concern that a lot of the parents I work with have is they are reluctant to get a diagnosis, or they have gotten a diagnosis and now their child is has a self-fulfilling prophecy going on and so forth. So basically, what I really want to reiterate with all of this is that when kids have a reading disorder, it might not get flagged if they don't meet that score. And that's really unfortunate. And really, what can be the actual case is that it's what I call a learning glitch, a reading glitch, whatever, behavior, whatever it is. The area breakdown. So critics are saying, let's get rid of the scores and focus instead on diagnosing dyslexia, other reading disorders, even learning disorders on a spectrum, which I'm all for, because this is where none of the kids are going to get missed, because I do not believe that there is such a thing as a weak learner. Totally, kids develop at different phases. And I think that we have to be careful as well not to be alarmist and assume that if little Johnny is a little bit behind everyone else, that he automatically has a learning disability. But there's very clear things we can do to screen for that, as well as to mitigate. Like, I was just talking to a mom today who, enrolled in my program, and she has a younger child that she's like, oh, there's a lot going on that were flags for the child that she had called for. But she's like, I'm seeing them now. Like, I wish I had gotten onto it with my oldest sooner. So she is going to, do these things with her youngest as well. So basically what you want to do is what I think would be ideal is if we look at reading disorders as a spectrum, and we diagnose it as a spectrum, screen it as a spectrum. And when we look at it as a spectrum, then we can also look at the factors as a spectrum. So I talked about this before. The last few weeks, I've been talking quite a bit about it. So we want to look at stuff like nutrition, gut health, toxicity, food sensitivities, all of that type of stuff. Is the auditory processing optimal? What's taking place with that? Like, what's going on with that? What's causing the breakdown? Same with visual processing. And then, of course, we want to look at all the stuff that I always talk about, like retained reflexes, brain imbalance, cerebellum development, block learning gates, all of the things. So basically, let me know in the comments below if you think that we need to stop focusing on scores and instead focus on, like, what is the issue? Is it mild, moderate, and severe? And finding out if it's mild, moderate, severe, the purpose to that is just so that we can get to the root cause. And just because when it's severe, there's usually several layers, right? Like all the things that I just mentioned, usually there's several of, like, many of those things or all of those things going on. And so that can just really help us get to the root cause. And really the problem when we start going, focusing on scores and so forth, is we get stuck in this practice model, this practice model, that if we just have them in more tutoring, we just have a better tutor, we just have more of this, then they're going to improve. And less is, or more is not better. Less is more, as our moms or grandmothers or whoever used to say. A lot of the time, if we can just do the right things, doing the right things, right action at the right time, and so forth. So let me know in the comments below, have you had your child screened? Do you suspect that they were missed or that their screening didn't cover everything? Do you find, never mind screenings and diagnoses, but just in general, that the obsession with scores and numbers and data is getting your child, is actually like further hindering your child's ability to progress, because all of their self-worth and their progress and their motivation is attached to that score. So thanks for watching, everyone. I just wanted to pop on to chat about that. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to grab my laser focused learner starter kit. I'll post that in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Bye.